Victorian unions have been the main target of tough industrial laws in the last 5 years. Laws that have been policed by the controversial Australian Building and Construction Commission. Now there's renewed pressure to abolish the Melbourne-based commission. Cheryl Hall has the story.
It was, according to the unions, an attack on their very existence. Set up by the Howard government 5 years ago, the Australian Building and Construction Commission has used its extensive powers to prosecute and fine the strongest unions in the country. Its head, John Lloyd, makes no apologies as he prepares to leave his $460,000 a year job.
I was surprised by the lack of respect for the law and the amount of unlawful conduct. Now, during those 5 years, we have improved the conduct of industry quite markedly. It's now more lawful, and those who break the law are held to account.
What sort of conduct are you talking about?
Talking about unlawful strikes, coercion, threats, intimidation.
The cases that they've run, the activities that they've undertaken, and the results they've achieved in terms of the reduction in unlawful incidents in our industry speak volumes for the work he's done. And now that he's going, I'm greatly concerned about who will be stepping up to the plate and what sort of enthusiasm they'll have for the role.
Victoria and Western Australia remain the hotspots, with Victorian unions accumulating $2.3 million in fines and Western Australia nearly $1 million.
I think it's just a culture that's grown up in Victoria. In every measure that we have, Victoria is by far the worst state.
CFMEU Assistant Secretary Joe McDonald is the face of dissent in Western Australia. He's been convicted twice for unlawfully entering a building site and faces another 5 prosecutions. In Victoria, CFMEU officials have also been the prime target, mostly on large state government projects like the Westgate Bridge, where they tried to stop an AWU agreement and replace it with their own. For that dispute alone, the CFMEU received a record fine of $1.3 million.
Now, I'm not going to for a moment say that everything that every member of our union does on every occasion is 100% right. That would just be silly. But Mr Lloyd has failed to prosecute even one employer for underpaying a worker, for ripping off workers' entitlements, despite having the power and the responsibility to do so. So what that figure really points to is the fact that the ABCC has been not been even-handed.
The courts, I think, are noting that in our cases now that the CFMEU is a repeat offender and some of their officials, and so my sense is that the penalties are reflecting that and are creeping higher in the range. And I would imagine that would continue.
The ABCC has restricted union activity on building sites, but it doesn't seem to have affected their power to negotiate. Labourers at Victoria's massive desalination plant, being built in Gippsland, are being paid $150,000 a year for a 56-hour week. Tradesmen more than $220,000.
The desalination project is the highest paid construction project in the country. Worked reasonably well. We have no disputation with the employer. And not that because of the ABCC is watching over, it's because the parties made a commitment to each other that when an agreement has been struck, then we're going to live up to that agreement, and we have.
The most controversial power given to the ABCC is the power to compel someone to attend and answer questions. South Australian CFMEU member Ark Tribe is waiting to find out if he'll be the first person to go to jail for refusing to answer questions.
I could go to jail if I refused to answer a question, and that is nonsense, not in a first world country.
It's important power because previously a code of silence had operated, and if you were seen to be cooperating with an investigation into unlawful conduct, you could be targeted with reprisals on the building sites. Now that led to about half of investigations not coming to fruition. And also it's often not understood that a number of people request to give evidence under the power because they are aware that on their particular site or in their circumstances they do face reprisals.
The debate has also become personal. ABCC inspectors have been verbally abused when attending construction sites. and John Lloyd was allegedly spat on by a CFMEU official when buying his lunch.
Do you feel personally targeted by them?
Oh, at times. I mean, there's been some nasty comments and some pretty personal attacks, but look, that goes with the job and I don't worry about it. But yes, that is unfortunate. I don't think it reflects very well on the union, and I'm of course more concerned when there's been assaults and abuse of my inspectors.
Notices like these, given the addresses of ABCC employees, were removed from one building site. Changes that would water down the ABCC's powers failed to be passed by the Senate before the election and have now lapsed. But unions are again lobbying the ALP and the Greens to have the ABCC abolished.
We need to convince all members of Parliament of the position that there ought to be a common set of laws and rights for workers in Australia, and we will certainly be putting those views to the Independents, to the Labor Party and to the Greens.
I guess I've got a sinking feeling that that the will of government will ultimately see it watered down or destroyed. Because that is the mood of the Labor government. They had legislation in the wings to water it down.
John Lloyd says that would mean the unions will be back in town.
Mr Lloyd would say that. He's had a 5-year sinecure on a massive salary doing that job. He's been paid more than the Chief Justice of the High Court, more than the head of the Industrial Relations Commission, and more than the Prime Minister. So I think if we're looking at reform of workplace relations, I'd like to look at the obscene salaries paid.
Well, there is a risk here. As I say, we've certainly changed the conduct. I think the culture, particularly in Victoria and to a lesser extent Western Australia, hasn't changed much. And if there was a reduction in the effectiveness of the powers, well then I think the bad practices of the past could return. And that would be most unfortunate for the industry, but also for the economy.